Mac here on Birds 365, McMullen and McDonald. We are joined by a guy who's only been covering the Eagles for a couple of years, a couple being decades. You can get all of his insights and thoughts on his website, Les Bowen, that's with an E, Les Bowen's Jawn, JAWN.com. And he's good enough to hop in with us when we request his presence. Les Bowen joins us here on Birds 365. Les, as I give you credit for how long you've been covering the Eagles, playoff collapse comparable Philadelphia Eagles to Monday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Is that as bad as you remember?
Yeah, it is. The only thing that's remotely, there's nothing really comparable. I mean, there's never been a team that started out 10-1 and then did this. But I remember that last year with Donovan McNabb, it was a winning team that toward the end of the season kind of faltered, and they played Dallas in the regular season finale for seeding, I guess. I don't remember the specifics, and they got whomped. And that meant that they had to play Dallas in the wild card round the very next week.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same game. They got whomped again. It was like that in that nobody expected them to go down to Tampa and play well. I think there were some people that expected Tampa to be so helpless that the Eagles would somehow stumble to victory, which actually seemed almost possible when it was 16-9, well into the third quarter. But, I mean, this team, I keep saying, and I know it sure looks like Nick Sirianni is coming back, and I guess he is, but I've never seen a team play like this over a prolonged period at the end of the season and the coach not get fired. It just doesn't happen. And I'll be fascinated with how they try to put this back together and send him back out there next year in front of a fan base that, certainly isn't going to be real receptive to that. I don't think people stop playing. I mean, I don't know any better way to put it than that. They didn't have any confidence in what they were being asked to do. They can all stand in front of their lockers on cleanout day and say, I love Nick and this is great and everything's going to be wonderful. But they checked out. There's no other way to put it. And we'll just have to see how this goes.
Yeah, that was the Donovan game you were mentioned. That was the air guitar game, Les. Remember that?
Yes.
He was playing air guitar, and everybody had a problem with that. They didn't show up. But, I thought that was the most disturbing part of the game in Tampa was the tackling. And tackling, there's some technique and fundamental involved. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of effort involved, too. And I didn't see a lot of effort down the field. And that was the most, as I said, troubling part to me, because if a team is checking out on you, but I don't think the veteran leaders were. And there's and you've been to a lot of clean out days. And there's a couple guys who they're out of Dodge. And the same thing happened yesterday. Marcus Mariota, Nick Morrow, Shaq Leonard, out of Dodge. I mean, there's not a speck of dust in their lockers, never mind any personal items. Not the case with the veteran leaders who generally stood up for Nick Sirianni. Is that meaningful to you, or is that not all that meaningful?
At the very least, I think, John, they're reading the tea leaves there. I mean, I think if Nick were going to be fired, it would be done by now. You have a report that Nick and Howie are calling around about coaches, which certainly indicates that Nick's going to be, making these decisions. I would not want to be a guy standing there saying, well, the coach didn't do a very good job, and then they're going to bring the coach back.
That's a tough sell, by the way. But he hasn't met with Jeffrey yet until he meets with Jeffrey.
But Jeffrey's not clumsy enough to have him go through all of this. And then, after people have already started hiring coaches, say, oh, by the way, you're fired. I don't see that.
Do I? But
Nick could open mouth and then
doing it on his own. Yeah.
Nick,
is it possible?
No ideas.
I don't think he can put a 0% he could be fired. I think Nick could go in and absolutely shoot himself to
Yeah,
that.
he could. He could.
That's
I
the
don't
only way
expect-
it's going to get done. But you have to at least
Yeah.
leave that possibility open.
But I've said before, I think in the previous times when Lurie's had to fire a coach, it's come at the end of a horrible season, a losing season. And even with Doug Peterson, I mean, there was a lot of talk that they kind of thought Doug was going to stay, but there were also reports that Doug wanted out. The team was 4-11-1. They had spent a few months thinking of what they would do if they had to hire a coach. They weren't maybe, discussing Nick Sirianni specifically, but they had some idea they might be hiring a coach. 3-4 weeks ago, they had no idea they were going to be hiring a head coach. And I think that's a big deal with somebody like Jeffrey Lurie. He's a process guy. He wants to, have a foot-thick, leather-bound report on his desk from all of his people about, you
Matt
should talk to
Patricia's binder. That's what got Matt
he's
Patricia the job.
He's not one to shoot from the hip. He's not one to say,
Let me ask you about that because, this is a very, as you mentioned, collaborative organization, and that comes from Jeffrey, and he wants all these different voices, and he wants all this advice. At some point, does that become a detriment? Because we're all asking, like, who made the decision on Matt Patricia? I truly believe it was Nick, so he deserves credit, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I think you meant saying blame, right, John? Not credit.
Yeah, well, credit in the form of blame.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's certainly on Nick from my standpoint, but I can't say that with 100% because he can't just walk in the door and say, "Hey, today I'm going to make Matt Patricia the defensive coordinator, the de facto DC." He's got to run that by Howie. He's got to run that by Nick. Jeffrey. He's got to run it by people. Are they too collaborative? Does it get in their way occasionally?
That's a very good question, John. There's certainly a case to be made for that. And not only are they maybe a little too collaborative, but the fact that you don't ever hear during the season from Howie or from Jeffrey leads to wild speculation. It doesn't help. I don't think I make fun of the fact that Jerry Jones has a press conference after every game where
it's great though.
Where he, I don't know if we should have done that on 3rd and 4. That's why no good coach who's really on the way up ever takes that job. But at the same time, I would like to have some idea. You don't have to speak in absolutes or anything, but after the last game, when people see you stalking through the corridor the way Jeffrey was, with his jaw set, what are your thoughts about this season? Give me something. Give me a little bit of an indicator of where your head is. I mean, you're a smart man. You can speak without, putting your foot in your mouth. I go back to the Chip Kelly firing year, John.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but I was going through some pictures on my phone, and I stumbled upon the pictures of Jeffrey on the field at NovaCare right before the season started, where he gave us chapter and verse about what a wonderful leader Chip Kelly was, and his leadership style was just right for this organization. And he had all the confidence in the world in Chip Kelly. And with a week left in the season, he couldn't wait to fire the guy. And I eventually got to talk to Jeffrey about that at an owner's meeting, kind of off the record. And he basically said, well, I felt like I needed to indicate support. Basically, I needed to lie to you.
Yeah.
That's not, no. People need to have, there's plenty of things he could have said going into the season that wouldn't have stabbed Chip in the back, but would not have been, Chip's the most wonderful guy we've ever had here. What are you talking about?
I think the most convoluted explanation to anything I've ever remembered from Jeffrey Lurie was the twisted, I had to give Chip the power to see what he really was. I mean, that is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No,
that was incompetence on his part, frankly. I mean, that was just, you had 2 years of Chip, 2 10-6 seasons. The second one, you didn't even make the playoffs. It wasn't really. It started out, I think, 9-3 or something, and ended up 10-6.
Yeah.
You don't give a guy more. You don't say the problem here is that Chip doesn't have enough power.
Yeah.
If you have any conviction in your own judgment in making Howie Roseman the general manager, you don't say, "Oh, okay, Chip, we'll just toss Howie over here, and you do whatever you want, trade away all the good players." Sure. No, I mean, that just doesn't speak very highly of him and his processes that he likes to talk about. So, it's anyway, what I started off on this tangent with was the collaboration and the lack of transparency at any point, from the organization. You don't know what they're thinking. You never know what they're thinking until they do something. And then, then you have to kind of,
and then everybody says, "Oh, we were lying to you." Which is Nick, Nick in Seattle, same thing.
Right.
Protecting the player. "Oh, I had to lie to you." Essentially is what he said. Yeah, it happens all the time.
All right, Les, I need you to do some ranking for me.
Okay.
The 3 most powerful Eagle coaches before the season started: head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. The season is over and done with. The results are what the results are.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to rank. Should they be fired? Yes or no? Give me the yes or no, and put them in an order of most culpable of the 3, knowing the different responsibilities, different things they had to do, different experiences, all in evaluation of should they be meritorious of keeping their job. Give me a yes or no on Sirianni, on Johnson, on Desai, and what order would you put them in of most culpable to least culpable to be fired?
Well, I think the most culpable has to be the defense. I mean, you can't, looking at what they did statistically, looking at how it all unfolded, that was a disaster. It never really looked decent at any point during the season. They had a couple good games in the middle part of the season, I guess. They really did better when they were struggling with injury than they were when they were healthy. That was the worst mess, and I don't think there's any case for retaining that guy. Nick, I wouldn't fall over myself to retain Nick, but they know, I guess, more than I do about what's available and who they can fit in with. And John alluded to the collaborative nature thing. There's some of the top candidates that are available right now aren't going to be part of that collaborative process. Nick would be second to me, but I don't think he's going to get fired. If it were my organization, there's a good chance he would be, but I don't think that's going to happen. Brian Johnson, I have no idea. I mean, I heard John kind of sticking up for him there before I came on. I don't know. If you're not going to fire him, you better fire the quarterback's coach, because Jalen Hurts was wandering in the desert this year. And some of that's probably Jalen's fault, but not all of it. Everybody's seen the film cut-ups from Monday night with the blitz and the wide open field, nobody in the middle of the field, and 4 guys running down the sidelines as hard as they can while the blitz comes into Jalen's face. That's ludicrous. And somebody's got to fix that. So I would certainly get rid of Brian Johnson if I can get a decent offensive coordinator in here. Meshing him with Nick Sirianni, that's got to be tricky. I've said, if you bring in a new offensive coordinator and he wants to change things, then what exactly does Nick Sirianni do if it's not his offense?
You might as well. If you're going to change the offensive coordinator, you might as well fire the coach.
Yeah. So I don't know. But defense, you've got to get that straightened out day one and kind of work on the rest of it as you go along. I don't know what you do. I think a lot of position coaches are going to get fired because you didn't see people getting any better. And I thought what Darius Slay said about Denard Wilson was very telling, that even if they'd kept him around as defensive backs coach, which he was apparently willing to do, that this would have been better than what they ended up with. And maybe Denard Wilson comes back as the coordinator if the Ravens,
By the way, he got an interview for the Giants defensive coordinator job already, Denard Wilson. So, yeah, I mean, that was probably a mistake, probably not staying in-house with Denard. A lot of issues that can go back. But I do believe, and this is what I was saying, Les, I want to get your thought on this. And I think there's evidence in the building. And what I mean by that is last season, you had two very good coordinators, even though people didn't know it with one of them, but now they know it. They had a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense. They were terrible on special teams. Terrible.
Yeah.
And everybody said, fire Michael Clay, fire Michael Clay, fire Michael Clay. All of a sudden, they're pretty damn good on special teams. They fell apart on defense. They were still good over the long haul offensively, but down the stretch, they were terrible. And the special teams, you're saying, they're pretty solid on special teams. Yeah. Michael Clay grows into the position.
He did. I don't really get it, but he did. Yeah.
Sometimes, and by nature, we saw it with Andy Reid. Andy Reid's 1999, you know this, his coaching staff, his original coaching staff, is one of the great coaching staffs of all time.
Right.
It really is. And then as you started to get the attrition, the Xerox copy, I always like to compare it, never quite as sharp as the original. Right. Now, sometimes they get better and they grow into the position. You had some good guys moving forward, some bad guys. Do people need a chance to grow into a damn position?
And I can look at that with I was watching Sean McDermott the other day on the side and reflecting on how he got bounced out of here as coordinator because Asante Samuel and a few of the veterans are like, who is this clown from William and Mary? This little guy that never played in the league. He's yelling at me. He's not Jim Johnson. I won't play for this guy. Well, he's had a pretty long career since then.
Yeah.
And he's,
and there were a whole bunch of people that had him fired when Buffalo was 6-6. Oh, who's going to be coaching the Bills next year? But they win this week. They're in the AFC Championship game.
Yes.
How's that going? People who wanted Sean McDermott fired at 6-6.
Exactly. There are, Todd Bowles was the defensive coordinator here after they fired Juan in 2012.
Yeah.
And that was hapless. We would talk to Todd Bowles every week and he was like, we're going to go out there again. There was nothing to indicate that Todd Bowles was going to be any. I respected him as a guy who, even at that point, had been a good coach in a few places, but you couldn't tell by anything that was happening there that Todd Bowles was any great shakes as a coach, for sure. I don't know. I'm way on the outside of it here, but with Clay, I just wonder if the personnel got a little better too.
Well, they did. No doubt about it. And that's why I always say
that's a big part. That's a bigger part of special teams than I think it is in some other areas, because if you don't devote any resources to special teams, you're going to have bad special teams. There's no wonderful special teams scheme. And they found that out with that Bobby April guy they hired, who was supposed to be a special teams whiz. Remember that many, many years ago?
Yeah, Bobby.
If you don't put
John Bossel's pretty good at it, though. Dave Bibb was pretty damn good at it.
The good special teams coordinators demand or have the gravitas to demand, okay, I need this roster spot. I need a guy that can do this. I need this. You don't just say, okay, what do you have left over this week on the 53 that I can run out there and protect a punt return with?
By the way, somebody, I wish I were there. I read a great article and I forget. I'll try to look it up because I want to give him credit on head coaching and special teams coordinator. And they talked to Harbaugh, who obviously was the longtime special teams coordinator here. And then eventually had to move to secondary so he could get a head coaching job, because nobody's given a head coaching job to a special teams coordinator. And even with Harbaugh's success over 16 seasons now, nobody looks at those guys.
Right.
I think that's a mistake for the reason that they're the only other coach that works with the whole team.
Yeah.
The whole team.
And they coach offensive guys. They coach defensive guys. They have
except the quarterback. They don't work with the
Yeah.
quarterback, but
Right.
and that's what puts them behind the 8 ball.
Well, I think people see. I think the trend of the game is working against them. I think special teams, with what they've done to kickoff rules and so forth, with the onside kick rules, special teams is a less dramatic part of the game than
Well, I
it used
agree
to
with
be.
that, but my point,
And
Les, is special teams, and you've heard this cliche. If you hear it with coaching searches, if you're hiring a scheme, you're doing it wrong. It's
yeah,
been around forever, and they
and that's
do it
true.
every stinking
Yeah.
time. They go,
Yeah.
"Oh, Ben Johnson, let's get Ben Johnson." Well, could you bring Detroit's talent with them? Then I
Right.
say, yeah, give me Ben Johnson.
What I would look for in that instance, by the way, is do you have somebody who's worked with a quarterback who's roughly analogous to Jalen Hurts or has some of the same traits that Jalen Hurts has? Can you find someone, in that mode? I really think there's got to be a lot of attention given to that factor. I would not bring anybody in here whose expertise is working with a, Joe Flacco type quarterback.
Yeah,
I want you to,
which is all the rage, the
yeah,
Shanahan Kubiak offense. Everybody
yeah,
loves it. But that's play action heavy. And that's Joe Flacco, Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy type quarterbacks. That's not Jalen Hurts type quarterbacks. So be careful
right.
what
You
you
look
wish
at
for.
somebody who's worked with a
Well,
Lamar Jackson.
then does it just come down to RPO, non-RPO? There's two divisions. There's RPO, there's non-RPO. Is it more distinctual than that? Because a lot of times
Lamar is a perfect example of and John Harbaugh has done different things over the years, and trying to get Greg Roman involved to try to mesh the two together, and they've had tremendous success developing Lamar Jackson. Got to do it in the playoffs, obviously, and we'll see what they're able to do this weekend. I think they're the best team in the AFC, so they're doing a pretty good job. But if you put Lamar Jackson in the Shanahan Kubiak offense, I don't think he's as good. I think you build around what you have.
But if you put him in the Siri offense, would he not be good?
Lamar
or would it be great?
Great in this offense.
Think
Lamar
so?
would be, he would be great in this offense.
He would have to break a lot of tackles and do a lot of running when they blitz.
Well, they wouldn't blitz as much because Lamar can handle the blitz. But I'm blaming a lot of that on Jalen Hurts. I am, and Jody knows this. In good times and bad times, I always say it's personnel first. It's players first. Always. I think way too many fans think the coaches have joysticks and they're manipulating everything and they can control. Yeah. Jason Kelce, as I said, Hall of Fame player, one of the great centers of all time. I don't think that's hyperbole. He was bad in Tampa.
Yeah,
even players like that. Yeah, even players like that have bad games. He had a bad game.
Matchups. Yeah.
Bad matchups. Yeah, Vita's a bad matchup for him. It's always players first, in good times and bad. So I don't ship from
But what was Jalen supposed to do with 4 verticals and 8 blitzers or whatever?
Yeah, but look, when they run all go, and that's the 4 verticals against the blitz, I'm with you. I say, what the hell are you doing? But when it comes to recognizing where the blitz is coming from, and if Jalen's not looking the right way, remember, sight adjustment means sight adjustment. That means if AJ Brown's on the field, Jalen Hurts is on the field, they have to say, all right, this guy's coming. We're going to run the hot route. Ball's coming out, slant, whatever.
Yeah.
That a lot of that goes on the quarterback.
Yeah, and there was that big 3rd and 2 early in Monday night's game in which they had a running play called, apparently, which was the thing to do there, especially with their offense. You run it on 3rd and 2, and then you certainly don't lose any yardage, probably, and you can run the brotherly shove, tush push on 4th and whatever. Jalen checked out of that and apparently gave 2 different signals for what he was checking into.
Exactly.
One receiver got one signal, another receiver got the other signal, and it was a disaster. And that just can't happen. You've been playing all season. I mean, these are week one things. I don't know if
Well, I
Jalen
would argue, and
complicated
again, if I'm going to criticize Nick Sirianni, I mean, he's been here for 3 years.
Mhm.
They can't run a rub route. There's still guys going downfield, illegal men downfield.
Yeah.
That to me is stuff that is the stuff I focus on. That's bad.
Yeah.
Because that is really bad. I think that gets lost in the sauce when the players don't perform. Because a lot of times Jalen was a superstar. He makes a play. AJ's a superstar. He makes a play. Devontae makes a play. And they make up for it. But when you're not playing at that level and you don't make up for it, then it becomes all about the coaching staff. It's always personnel first.
Yeah, that's certainly, I agree with you there. Yeah.
And part of that is the thing that I know annoys both John and I for different reasons. The continued use of bubble screens.
Yeah.
You suck
are
at
all
it.
over that. It looks like they're
we've
fighting
been
each
able
other
we've been able to watch it for ourselves. You suck at it. John thinks the play just in general sucks. I think it can be very good if you've got the talent, the ability, the determination to actually pull it off. We're in week 14, 15, pick whatever late season. You've sucked for 14 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's continue to try and do it. That's on Brian Johnson. He keeps sending it in. That's on Jalen Hurts. He keeps checking off to it. They kept doing it even though they couldn't do it to save their lives. At some point, you got to go, stop. Don't do it anymore. And they continue to do it. That's egregious as far as I'm concerned, Les.
But they did a hell of a lot with Shane Steichen. And it was as ugly as it was now. They're not good at it. They haven't been good at it. It's basically, and I talked to Shane a lot about this, it's basically a numbers play, which I hate. And this is why I hate the play, because that's what modern sports has become. It's why everybody takes threes in the NBA. Everything's a math equation. Launch angle, baseball, everything. Everything's a math equation. It's more likely to hit a 3-run home run than play station-to-station baseball. So swing for the fences. In football, we got an extra man. We got numbers on the outside. Throw the bubble screen. They did it a million times with Shane Steichen. They do it a million times now. They weren't good at it with Shane. They weren't good at it with Brian. That to me is teaching fundamentals, and they're not good at it. And that is a criticism of the coaching staff.
To take advantage
By the way,
of
Aaron
that,
Moorhead might get fired.
Oh, yeah. But to take advantage of that numbers thing, you have to be able to, everybody has to be able to get to their block.
Yeah, exactly.
And you see that happening over and over again where, okay, theoretically, if this guy had run all the way over here and the defender hadn't already gotten in the receiver's face, then there would have been a block and it all would have worked. But how realistic was that to begin with? Especially since the defender has seen so much Eagles tape that he's in the backfield before the ball is snapped almost. I mean, it's you mentioned something a little while ago that I want to get your in. I have a theory on the offensive lineman downfield. I posit that there was a time several years ago when you almost never saw that called. And I don't think it was because offensive linemen weren't leaking a little bit downfield during that time. I think when RPOs became popular, defensive coordinators started bitching about this. Because on an RPO, guys do, because they think it's probably a running play. They jump out there, and defensive coordinators quickly realized that they could go to the league and say, hey, what's this? They're not supposed to be doing that. Now, the point of the rule is so you don't have blockers running downfield and, getting in the way of pass defenses, which they aren't really doing on an RPO very much. But, they're past the whatever.
But, 2
yards. So all of a sudden, if a guy steps a toe over that imaginary line, he's downfield. Had nothing to do with the play, but that's a penalty. We're going to stop RPOs.
You're 100% right, Les. And this also goes back to Chip Kelly because it started with Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
And if you watch a college game, any college game, you got an offensive lineman leaking 4 yards down the field at time. They don't call anything at college.
And who cares? What does it matter?
But
unless the guy's running down there and doing a rub route, as a guard, what the hell does it matter whether he's 2 yards off the ball or 2.5
But if you're
yards?
the difference, if you're a defensive coordinator, as you said, and the reason they're bitching, it makes it really hard to play defense. You don't see a lot of defense at the college level when you're playing elite offenses. And that's one of the reasons, because they don't call those types of penalties.
But are the offensive linemen in the way, or does it just make it harder to decipher whether this play is a run or a pass?
I think it makes, when you got a big, I think it's both, but when you get, I think the bigger issue is when you got a big 300-pound guy moving downfield trying to block a defensive back. That's an issue because there aren't many defensive backs that can shed even the worst offensive linemen. So it becomes really difficult to play defense. And defensive coordinators are going to bitch about that. It's like, this is the rule, call the rule. Right. And that's how they call it in the NFL. It's way tighter, and it should be. And the Eagles need to know that, and they have to abide by the rules, but that's also a timing play. So the offensive lineman has no idea what's going on behind him. So he's like, tick, tick, go.
Again, let me put a rearview mirror in Cam Jurgens' helmet.
Yeah. Whose fault is that, though? If the ball's not out, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
I would be.
I guess you're saying the quarterback. I don't know. We'll see. But
all right, last one for me, and we always appreciate you joining us. We've parsed and debated, and will continue to do so. Nick Sirianni, and should he continue as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles? Dallas Cowboys seem to be sticking with their guy, and truth be told, is that ship was going down over the weekend. I thought there was a much better chance that Mike McCarthy was getting his walking papers than Sirianni. The Eagles' loss, as embarrassing as it was, I don't think was as embarrassing as the Cowboy loss.
No, it wasn't.
Because they were home. They were
home and they were playing well. They were home and they were playing well. There was no reason.
They were undefeated at home.
Yeah.
They were undefeated.
16 in a row at home.
Yeah.
Their quarterback's playing like an MVP. They're talking about him for the MVP. Mike McCarthy has fixed the offense. Dan Quinn has fixed the defense. He's around interviewing for head coaching jobs. Meanwhile, Green Bay could have put up 60 points if they had really wanted to.
And by the way, Jody, Matt LaFleur won the coin toss and took the football and set the tone.
Yeah.
Set the tone.
No kidding.
Well, with the Eagles defense, I would absolutely do that, but that's a tangent. But what happened to Dallas? I kind of see keeping McCarthy, because what do you do now? I mean, where you had a tremendous season, and then the only thing that you can take out of that game is that the playoff drought there in Dallas has gotten so far into these players' heads, even though a lot of them haven't been there all that long, that they just can't perform. That the spotlight is too bright, the microscope is tuned up too high, and there's something here. But I don't know that a new head coach fixes that. Everything the guy did worked all year long. I can understand them keeping him. I don't know what the only fix for Dallas is a new owner. And that's, we don't know when that's going to happen.
And by the way, for all the talk about Jerry Jones, he rarely changes coaches.
He doesn't. That's one of the biggest false narratives in football.
I know.
Oh, wild man Jerry Jones.
How long was Garrett there?
Coach is much more leashed than I think most general football fans think he should.
Yeah.
I remember when Dallas Eagles games back in the Andy Reid era, back many, many years ago, Andy would always make a point to say what a good job he thought Dave Campo did, and how the criticism that man got was just undeserved.
Not the special teams,
because he did 2 games a year against that guy.
Not a head coach, but
Dave Campo, wonderful coach.
One of the few guys who actually did get a pretty quick hevo down there in Dallas. We are not giving you the hevo, Les Bowen, but parting his sweet sorrow. And unfortunately, we need to do that. Check out his website, Les Bowens. That's with an E, JAWN. We won't get off on a John tangent today. Just check out LesBowensJohn.com and check him out when he joins us here on Birds 365. Les, always a pleasure. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Les.
Thank you, guys.
It's Les Bowen here with us on Birds 365. All right, Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call managing partners Jim or Fran and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!